With an agreement or without an agreement, we will prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. The ceasefire with Iran is in danger. The Strait of Hormuz is paralyzed, and Trump is once again threatening Tehran with a clear demand: a deal or complete surrender. Iran's president is exposing the depth of the Revolutionary Guard's collapse. He admitted that it is very difficult to make contact with the Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei. It appears that Iran and Oman have reached an agreement on the Strait of Hormuz. What does it say? We'll bring you all the details. And are Donald Trump's threats still working? Trump claimed that the strait would open while the Revolutionary Guards mocked him and said, "Trump is stuck in the mud." And at the same time, Washington removed restrictions from 2 aircrafts and 3 airlines connected to the Revolutionary Guards of Iran. The IDF remains on maximum alert, ready for a strike in Iran, with a target bank that could change the rules of the game. Here in Israel, officials understand that the real test with Iran has been postponed to another time. And amidst the rumors, Vice President JD Vance is revealing the real nature of his relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Was there really a confrontation between them? And today, we will also bring you the historic American move that may completely reshape the relationship with Israel. Did President Trump really clash with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth? And what is behind the leaks? So, while the conflict between the United States and Iran shows no signs of fading, it seems that one decisive question remains unanswered. Does Iran truly want nuclear weapons? And if so, does it have the ability to develop them? A doctrine shift in Oman, behind Jordan's unprecedented threats to strike inside Iraq. And on the Lebanon front, the talks in Rome are suffering from Lebanese leaks and escalation on the ground. Behind the scenes of the suspension of the Rome talks at Israel's request, the Hezbollah terrorist organization violated the ceasefire, and the IDF launched an unusual wave of strikes in southern Lebanon. We will bring you all the details. I'm here, Pinto. Joining me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and the truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is August 5th. So let's begin. A limited memorandum of understanding between the United States, Iran, and Oman is in advanced stages. The move, which has been discussed for several weeks, is meant to renew the ceasefire between Washington and Tehran and bring the sides back to the negotiating table on the nuclear issue. As part of the emerging understandings, a temporary 60-day arrangement will be set between Iran and Oman with the possibility of extension. During that period, ships entering the Gulf will pass through Iran's maritime space, while ships leaving towards the Arabian Sea will do so through Oman's maritime space in coordination with Iran. According to the details of the agreement, during the interim period, no transit fees or usage fees will be collected. In addition, the sides will work to clear mines from the central lane of the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days. After the clearing is completed, the central lane will once again serve all incoming and outgoing vessels. The understandings also appear to give Iran broader influence over vessel movements in the strait compared with the situation before the war began. And at the same time, Iran and Oman are expected to open negotiations on a permanent arrangement that will regulate maritime traffic in the area. The contacts were led mainly by Oman and Iran, with assistance from Qatar, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, while the United States and the White House was actively involved throughout the negotiations. And in recent days, several calls took place between Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and the foreign ministers of Iran and Oman. Iran's foreign minister gave his initial approval to the agreement over the weekend, but the understandings were waiting for approval from Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei and from the Supreme National Security Council. The senior American official and a regional source said that the approval process was completed on Tuesday. If the agreement is signed, it is expected to calm the tensions in the region and return the United States and Iran to a path of dialogue. Still, the assessment is that even afterwards, the road to a comprehensive nuclear agreement will remain completed. Iranian Foreign Minister and the ministry spokesman Ismail Bagahi said that Iran and Oman have made progress in negotiations over the establishment of a safe commercial shipping lane throughout the Strait of Hormuz. And in a series of unusual and dramatic statements, Iran's President Pezeshkian revealed the severe threats faced by the Revolutionary Guards. He admitted that there had been a plan to topple the regime within just 48 hours, similar to what happened in Syria. Is the United States beginning to ease the pressure on Tehran? The United States Treasury Department removed sanctions on Fly Baghdad and 2 Boeing 737 aircrafts from the sanctions list without giving a public explanation. However, the company's CAO remains on the list and is directly linked to the Quds forces of the Revolutionary Guards. And there is one issue that I want to pause on. News, engineering, and control over the public agenda are not just media tools, they're also tools of war and politics. Pay attention to the message that is being spread in recent days from almost every possible direction. The United States is short on missiles, its ammunition stockpiles are running out, and its ability to continue the campaign against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran is limited. This message is already being presented as a central explanation for almost every decision that the American administration makes regarding the war. In the last 24 hours, another layer has been added. Media outlets in the United States are trying to paint a picture of a crisis in the relationship between President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. According to the reports, Trump's frustration with the war reached a boiling point, and during a summit at Camp David, he demanded explanations from Hegseth over why he was allegedly misled about a severe shortage of ammunition that could limit the military options against Iran. But it's important to stop and examine the picture carefully. American ammunition stockpiles are classified, and the numbers being published rely mostly on anonymous sources, on estimates and calculations based on different starting points. That's why there are major gaps between the reports that we receive. One source claims that the United States used about 80% of its THAAD interceptors, while other assessments point to a much lower figure. Similar gaps exist regarding Patriot interceptors, Tomahawk missiles, and other munitions. And it's important to understand another point. Much of this process does not necessarily indicate that the stockpiles are completely empty, but rather that quantities are being managed between theaters of war. The United States military has stockpiled spread across bases, ships, and logistical centers all around the world. When one theater becomes urgent, Central Command can receive interceptors and ammunition transfers from Europe and the Far East, or other strategic stockpiles. The meaning is that the Pentagon is concentrating power where it is needed now, while temporarily reducing its safety margin in other theaters. That is the difference between the missiles are gone and the global risk management is now more severe. So the real question is not whether the United States has missiles left, but how many it is willing to allocate to the Middle East, how many it must preserve against maybe China, Russia, and North Korea, and how long it will take the industry to replenish the stockpiles. Moving munitions between centers of power is a routine military action during war, not necessarily evidence of a collapse. There is no doubt that there is real wear and tear in the stockpiles of expensive and advanced systems, and that the pace of production is not designed for prolonged wars. This is in several theaters at the same time. But from there to the claim that the United States has run out of missiles, there is a long distance. The more reasonable picture is one of prioritization, redeployment, and accelerated production, not of an American military that has lost its ability to fight. And at the same time, Washington is already allocating billions of dollars to expand production of Patriot interceptors, THAAD interceptors, and additional systems. The leaks about a dispute at the top of the administration served political rivals well ahead of the midterm elections because they want to portray the administration as confused, divided, and also out of control. And at the same time, Russia, China, and Iran benefit greatly from embedding the message that American military power is worn down and that its deterrence is collapsing. There's no proof that all the reports are part of a coordinated influence operation, but when the same messages repeat again and again, and classified assessments are presented as absolute facts, the media itself can become a force multiplier for those who want to portray the United States as weak, both politically and also militarily. Vice President JD Vance addressed the media reports about an alleged tense meeting at the Blair House between him and Prime Minister Netanyahu and declared that no confrontation took place between the two leaders. The Vice President of the United States firmly rejected rumors of a difficult, tense meeting full of disagreements between him and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. According to him, the media reports intentionally painted a false picture of a direct confrontation and tried to present a rift between Israel and the United States. In reality, Vance said that it was a practical, good, and direct meeting intended to reduce tensions, clarify mutual positions, and smooth out the recent diplomatic and also policy disagreements between Washington and Jerusalem. And one of the oldest and most central alliances in the world may be facing a historic turning point. In light of a heavy political pressure from both sides of the American political map, and ahead of the expiration of the upcoming funding agreements, the Trump administration and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are advancing a dramatic framework, ending the annual transfer of billions of dollars in grants and moving to a model of strategic and industrial partnership. The new model will combine joint development of weapons and technology and will turn the military and the technological cooperation between Israel and the United States into a tighter alliance anchored in law. And we will bring you all the details. And at a ceremony on Mount Herzl, the remains of Shimon and Rebecca Herzl were brought from Serbia to Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu connected the family's legacy to Zionism, warned against anti-Semitism and against the Iranian threat, and emphasized that Israel will act to guarantee its security even without an agreement with Iran, and in cooperation with the United States of America. And on the Lebanon front, after 2 of our dear soldiers were killed by Hezbollah and its terrorist activity, our forces launched a focused wave of strikes last night in southern Lebanon in response to the blatant violation of the ceasefire by Hezbollah. And this came after the IDF issued an urgent evacuation warning to the residents of the village of Al-Mansouri in southern Lebanon. At the same time, reports in Lebanon said that 1 person was killed and at least 9 were wounded in the strike in the village of Tabrin. So, there's a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto. Joining me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and about the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. But before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button, and most importantly, don't forget to find me, Yair Pinto, and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts to get our first perspective of what it's like to live in Israel, especially now in this war. So, Life here in Israel keeps us moving all the time. We have to juggle between reserve duty, our day-to-day lives, coming home after serving in the Gaza Strip or in northern Lebanon, or for me, traveling the country, filming on the borders with Lebanon, Syria, the Gaza Strip, Egypt, and Jordan. That's an active lifestyle, especially when it's super hot and I need to spend my days out in the sun. So what I recommend to all of you, what I started to do myself, is to use the Israeli innovation superfood, which is called Vinya, okay? So they have Vinya hydration powder that I mixed into water, and that helps me stay hydrated through these warm days. They also have the daily Vinya pills that you can take, and they improve the blood flow in your body to your heart, your brain, and your muscles. So that's a great way to stay with high energy throughout the day. And I've been using them since I started going to this Gaza war on October 7th, and I kept using them up until now. I suggest you guys give it a try for yourself. Guys, ladies, everybody, go to vinyatbnisrael.com. Again, that's vinyatbnisrael.com, and try this Israeli superfood designed here in the Jewish state, and tell me if it gives you more energy, okay? vinyatbnisrael.com, and if you go there, you also help us create more content because we're partnering with them. Let's get back to the news now, because we turn to our senior Middle East correspondent. You know his name, right? Mati Shoshani. Mati, is the progress on the agreement between the United States and Iran worth anything at all if no one knows who is actually authorized to make decisions on the ground in Tehran? Is it Pezeshkian? Is it the Revolutionary Guards? Or Mojtaba Khamenei? We're not sure if he's alive or not, but who's making the decisions?
I love that question. It highlights one of the biggest questions we're dealing with in this entire war with Iran, which is who's actually making the decisions? Who's actually leading? Who can divert the ship that is the Iranian revolutionist, Iranian extremist ideology war machine? Who has the power to change that? And what was confusing and unclear at the end of February and the beginning of this war is now far more confusing and far more unclear as we record this in the beginning of August. Why is that? We still don't know if Mojtaba Khamenei, the Supreme Leader, the replacement of his father, is alive. They say he is. They quote statements from him. They say that someone might have met him somewhere in a dark room, in a car parked somewhere unclassified or classified. Who knows? No image, no video, no audio file, nothing for months on months on months. And believe me, if there was an easy way to get footage out, we would have already seen it. But even if he is alive and kicking or walking or swimming, whatever he's doing, that still isn't sufficient, because we have this huge question about the Iranians, which begs the question of, is anyone actually able to make a decision? Because when the political leadership, Pezeshkian, the foreign ministry, others in the, let's call it the public servant sector, they say things, and someone comes out from the IRGC behind sort of this, cloaked background of the people really moving things in the country, and comes out and says, no, we disagree with the statement. We reject your statement. You're betraying the country of Iran. And even when they sign ceasefire agreements, they go and immediately violate them. So you ask the right question. What is the point of an agreement with Iran if Iran, one, violates the agreements even when they sign them, two, might not have the power, ability, or desire to sign an agreement and then uphold their part of it? What does that look like? Possibly we sign an agreement. They say, we're handing over the enriched nuclear materials. And instead of that, a week into the agreement, CIA, Mossad pick up information, intel somehow, that says that they're trying to squirrel away, to hide away somewhere in the mountains, somewhere underground, somewhere in a city, in a bunker, in an unknown location. They're trying to hide their enriched uranium. And then we're stuck. Is this the Iranian government? Or is this a faction that is rebellious or counter-government within the Iranian government? That is the reality on the ground. That's what's happening right now in Iran. And it makes things incredibly complicated from an agreement perspective. I want to go for a second into what Trump has been saying in recent days. Trump says the following. He says, I'm deeply disappointed with the Iranian regime because they come to us to negotiate, we talk to them, and the next day they claim we never had a conversation and that it's all a lie. And I believe him. I truly do. I think this is exactly what's happening. I think they're once again playing the same game, a game in which they try to stretch out the time. They try to pretend as if they want to have a negotiation, but then back down from it in the last minute. A game in which they say one thing in one voice, and then someone else says something completely contradictory to that. That's what I think is really happening here. And it makes this whole proposition of an agreement impossible or a waste of time or both at the same time. And then with all of this negative and all of these pessimistic thoughts, you might ask the question, and it's a valid question, what do we do now? How do you negotiate? How do you end the war? And the simple answer is that there is no simple answer. The complicated answer is you squeeze and you push and you put pressure and pain on the Ayatollah regime until it forces them into a public outcry and public statement in which they give in to American demands, until they open up their borders and say, come, nuclear supervisors, and observe, until they pull back their forces from the banks of the Hormuz channel, wrong war, of the Hormuz Straits, and pull back from that and show the world that they mean business. And until that point, we are maybe doomed is the wrong word. We are called, we are needed to continue pushing and pressuring and squeezing and putting military, diplomatic, and financial pressure on the Iranian regime, because that's the only way to change things on the ground. But I need to say this openly. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to negotiate. Israel and the United States and Qatar and Oman and anyone else, Pakistan, that's trying to negotiate, should continue to try and do that, because even though there are enemies and even though they lie, you never abandon the diplomatic channel. You always need to keep an open communication channel to allow them to come, to allow them to sort of ask, sort of behind the scenes, maybe, can we, how sort of do we back down from this without losing face? You need to keep that diplomatic channel going. You need to keep the conversation going. And it's even outside of what the Iranians are talking about, and even beside the point of what they demand or say publicly, for the sake of Western populations, the United States voters, Israelis, Western countries, it's important that they know that the American government and others involved in this are doing everything they can to try and also negotiate and not just fight through what we call kinetic warfare endlessly. That is the catch that we're in. That's the reality that we're in. But I would tell you, and this is my personal opinion, that it's better to be here than not have attacked Iran in the first place. That's my opinion, because when you don't stand up to the bully, they get emboldened and they become more and more vile and violent in the attacks that they carry out. And this is where we want them. We want them thinking twice about whether or not they dare attack an American or Israeli target. We want them thinking 3 times about whether or not they can be seen in public, because a humming sound might come from above and send them to discover whether their end times theology was correct or incorrect. That's where we want the Iranian extremist regime. And we want them there because we need regime change, and we need them to be forced into changing their ways. It might take weeks or months, but sadly, that is what you must do when dealing with this kind of evil.
Is Iran now building a regional wall that does not depend only on Hormuz, but on an entire network of choke points? Hormuz, Bab el-Mandab, the Houthis, Iraqi militias, and also energy and ships.
Iran's methodology when it comes to military action and to proxy warfare has been for decades fighting indirectly. This last 12-month period, give or take, 14-month period, since Midnight Hammer in June of, or the 12-day war back in June of 2025, that's the exception when Iran is fighting directly, when IRGC is engaging directly, when the Iranian armed forces are launching missiles or fighting or threatening themselves. What they've done up till this point has always been fighting through proxies. Why do they do that? Because it's cheaper, it's more effective, and it allows them plausible deniability. That's why they do it. And what we're seeing right now is a supercharging of their attempts to use proxy warfare. Not only are they not detaching from proxy warfare, they're doubling down on it. What does it look like on the ground? They're using as much pressure as they can on Hezbollah forces to make them violate every ceasefire they ever have with Israel. They're using the Houthis and getting them to make, once again, threats about closing the Straits of Bab el-Mandab towards the Red Sea, not on the Hormuz side of the Arabian Peninsula. That's what they keep doing again and again and again, proxy warfare. And I need to remind you, this is only the tip of the iceberg. This is only what we know publicly. This is only what's declassified. Behind the scenes, Iran tries to carry out terrorist attacks through radicalized individuals, through bot mercenaries, not bots as in computers, but as in people they paid off to carry out attacks in every part of the world. When President Trump and the United States government talk about the fact that the Iranians have threatened the life of President Trump, that's not hyperbole. They mean it. They were paying and trying to get people to attack the President of the United States. And the same goes to leaders of the Israeli political echelon and their family members. They are terrorists. They are exporters of terrorism, and they are people who take joy and pride in hurting the innocent and the uninvolved. That's who Iran is. They're not a nation state that plays by the rules. They violate all the rules all the time, and every sign of ethics and chivalry is outside of their jargon, outside of their vernacular when it comes to this warfare. That's who Iran is. That's how they operate. And then it begs the question, where do we go from here? And the answer is more of the same. Israel, together with the United States, has carried out a very long series of decapitation actions on the tentacles of the arm, which is the octopus or the head of Medusa, whatever you want to call it, of the Iranian regime. We weakened and almost eliminated Hamas. We've dramatically weakened Hezbollah. We hurt the Houthis, specifically the United States Armed Forces last year, dramatically weakened the Houthis in their resolve to fight against the United States or Israel. And we've done the same to militias in Iraq and elsewhere around the world. Iran tries to fight through proxies, and we, the United States and Israel, weaken those proxies and cut off their arms and their tentacles that allow them to carry out those indirect attacks. We need to continue doing so. We need to continue exposing their methodology, their evil, their lack of values, their lack of respect for human life, or anything that could be considered Judeo-Christian or God-fearing in its nature. Call it out publicly and attack the symptom and the root cause. And I'll end on that point, which is what Israel has changed, and the United States have changed, is when they attack through their proxies, we no longer just limit our response to the proxies, but we go after the source, Tehran. When a missile flies from somewhere in Lebanon, from a Hezbollah target towards Israel, we don't just respond in Lebanon against Hezbollah, we go to the root cause, to Tehran, and we hit IRGC targets there, so they know we're not playing a tit-for-tat game. We're not playing a cat and mouse game. We are responding disproportionately to every attack, and they know, and you can see it in the fact that they haven't dared touch Israel in this round of the war. They might, but they haven't done it yet.
Mati, does the collapse of the ceasefire in Lebanon prove that the problem is not only Hezbollah, but the very fact that Lebanon signed an agreement that it does not have the power to enforce?
Hezbollah and Lebanon are really a very interesting case, in the sense that both it's an interesting test of whether Lebanon can rebuild itself or not, and two, in seeing how far Hezbollah is willing to go. Because Hezbollah is really in an interesting and very unpleasant place. They've taken a substantial beating over several years from Israel, losing the majority of their leadership, many of their high-level, let's call it field tactical level leaders, much of their infrastructure, much of the support of the local villages in southern Lebanon. They've lost a lot, and yet they continue to fight against Lebanon. And there's a test here on two directions. One is for the Lebanese government and Lebanese fighting force. Will they stand up to Hezbollah? And an extension of that question is, can they stand up to Hezbollah? And I'm not sure we have the answer to either of them. This ceasefire agreement, this pilot program has been an example of that. the IDF, together with the US, says to Lebanon, guys, it's all yours. Show us what you can do. We're pulling back, send in your forces. Let's see if you can remove Hezbollah. Let's see if you can hold on to this territory and prevent Hezbollah from coming back in and embedding itself in the civilian population. Let's see if you're willing to go head to head with an Iranian proxy on the ground. And the results are mixed. They were very bad. They failed at this last time around. This time the results are mixed. How do we know this? We've seen clashes between the Lebanese fighting forces and Hezbollah. We've seen mysterious ambushes and IEDs, explosions, taking place in various places. Clearly there's friction between the Lebanese army and Hezbollah. But also Israel has been taking hits. IDF forces continue to clash with Hezbollah terrorists. We've eliminated Hezbollah terrorists. They've just the other day harmed several IDF soldiers, killing 2 just the other day. And we know this. This means that Hezbollah is not done in Lebanon. And this should not come as a surprise to anyone. Hezbollah, just like Hamas, they're terrorists whose goal is to bring death and destruction. They're not nation builders. They're not freedom fighters. They are not, some civil liberties movement. They are paid weapons. They are paid guns, hired mercenaries by the Iranians fighting on their behalf to harm Israel first and foremost inside of Lebanon. And because of that, they'll continue fighting. We know this. By the way, some of those killed in the Hezbollah ranks in Lebanon have been none other than Iranians, IRGC officers that have been eliminated in some of the IDF strikes on them in Lebanon. What does this really mean? Again, this isn't the end of the story. We're looking at a story unfolding in front of our eyes. The test for the Lebanese government, led by Joseph Aoun, is an enormous test. Can you rebuild a nation after decades? We're talking going back to the late 70s when the problem started, the destabilization started in Lebanon. Decades of civil wars, decades of infighting, of tensions with Hezbollah, with different factions within the country, of foreign influences in the country. It takes time to rebuild. It takes a lot of pain to rebuild. And I think the trend is positive. The trend is positive, but it's complicated and it's dangerous, and the road ahead is treacherous for Lebanon. Just the other week, we saw, I think it was about a week and a half ago, we saw the president of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, meeting with the president of Turkey, a man who is very far from being a friend of Israel, Erdogan, a man who is anti-Semitic openly, a man who's anti-Israel openly, a man who calls for the murder of Israeli dignitaries and people openly and funds those actions. Lebanon is a very uncomfortable place between the anti-Israel, anti-West factions, Turkey, Iran, others in the region, maybe Qatar, that want to influence it and sort of keep them on the dark side. Yes, I said that. And versus the desire to rebuild a nation, to bring it back into the fold as a real, legitimate nation. I'm reminding you that just before I was born, Lebanon was considered the French Riviera of the Middle East. In the same way you see those images of Iran back in the 70s before the revolution, and you can't believe it's the same nation that you're seeing today. Women on the beach freely, university students demonstrating or having coffee, on the open boulevards. That was Lebanon too. It was a vacation destination for other countries in the region. And my prayer, my hope, my belief is that they can rise up from the ashes of radical Islam and rebuild themselves as a nation. They deserve it. They've suffered enough. They deserve to be removed from the scorn, the pain, from under the thumb of Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, those who are doing the bidding of their Iranian overlords. And they're going to need help to do that. We need to be honest about it. They're going to need help in uprooting the corruption from their country and their army. They're going to need help in training. They're going to need help in fighting against Hezbollah. If I put myself in the seat, in the hat, in the mindset of someone fighting in the Lebanese army, knowing full well that if I become publicly known to Hezbollah, my family might be in jeopardy. If I'm a high-ranking officer or a leader over there, if I publicly oppose Hezbollah, they've already eliminated many in Lebanon. It takes a lot of bravery to put yourself and your family at that level of threat, knowing full well that you're not necessarily going to win. That's a reality they have to contend with. So I think what we need to do is we need to do two things. Keep praying for the people of Lebanon, for the leadership of Lebanon, to oppose the evil that is Hezbollah that represents Iran. Secondly, to keep pushing our governments to fight against Hezbollah and make it easier for them to push out Hezbollah, to push out radical Islam, to rebuild, to restabilize, to build a government once again in Lebanon. God knows those people deserve that. They deserve a better chance. And not just them, also others in the Middle East. And as I always say, the road forward is a road that goes through diplomacy and through agreements. You can't bomb your way into stability. It's the exact opposite. You have to allow them to rebuild, and we need patience, we need time, we need cash to do that. But we also need to be real with the results and demand real results in real time, not just hope that somehow, somewhere they will fight against Hezbollah, but make sure it happens now so they stand a chance in the future.
Thank you very much, Mati. That really helped me better understand what we're facing with. And to all of you, keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. Find me, Yair Pinto, and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts. And let's get back to the news, because the Pentagon is accelerating the major expansion of American missile production after the Iran war exposed how quickly advanced weapons can be consumed. New factories, rocket motor capacities, sensors, and long-term purchase agreements are being pushed forward for THAAD, Patriot interceptors, and other weaponry. Washington is also debating whether shortages limited President Trump's military options or not. So, is the United States only rebuilding its arsenal or redesigning its entire military relationship with Israel? The clearest change is already happening inside the American factories. The plan is to raise annual THAAD interceptor capacity from 96 missiles to 400. Production of the PAC-3 interceptor used by the Patriot batteries is also being tripled. THAAD missiles require advanced guidance, electronics, heat-resistant materials, precision sensors, and solid-fuel rocket motors. A delay at one supplier can stop production of the complete weapon. The Pentagon is therefore using long-term framework agreements. Manufacturers receive predictable orders and can invest in machinery, in workers, and smaller suppliers without waiting for a new annual contract. A new factory in Alabama will add about 87,000 square feet of THAAD and future interceptor work. One report says that President Trump confronted Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Camp David and demanded a complete picture of the American missile inventories. The White House says that the confrontation never happened. The Pentagon insists that the United States has enough weapons to carry out every presidential order. The reported argument is disputed, but the pressure on American production is visible. American forces have used defensive interceptors, Tomahawk cruise missiles, ATA-CMS missiles, and the newer precision strike missiles during months of fightings. ATA-CMS reaches roughly 160 kilometers. The newer PRSM reached about 500 kilometers, allowing launchers to remain further from the Iranian fire. Reports based on inventory assessments say that much of the American long-range precise stockpiles and about half of the Tomahawk inventory were used. Weapons were also moved from other bases to reinforce the forces in the Middle East. That can fill a launcher today, but it doesn't manufacture the replacement. So, every interceptor fired over Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, or an American military base must eventually be replaced. This is where the American-Israeli relationship enters the new phase. The current 10-year security agreement provides Israel with about $3.8 billion in annual military assistance and expires in 2028. Talks are moving towards a model based less on direct grants and more on shared production, intelligence, and technology. Proposals before Congress already show the direction. One proposal would create a joint program, an office for countering unmanned aircrafts. Another would establish an American Defense Innovation Unit office inside Israel. Joint research covered the artificial intelligence, robotics, cyber, defense, automation, anti-tunnel systems, missile defense, and also technologies designed to defeat new generations of drones. A separate proposal would strengthen the intelligence sharing against the Iranian nuclear proliferation, against sanctions evasion, cyber attacks, missiles, drones, terror financing, and also proxy organizations. Israel contributes battlefield experience, intelligence access, and technology developed under constant operational pressure. And the United States contributes industrial scale, global logistics, strategic aircraft, satellite networks, and a defense budget that Israel cannot reproduce. So basically, the United States giving Israel grants to develop jointly and purchase American-made weapons from America. The United States doesn't just give Israel money. It gives Israel the ability to purchase weapons from America and then develop them together. So Iron Dome and David's Sling already demonstrate this model. Israeli requirements, American funding, and also joint production created systems that defended Israeli cities while supporting manufacturing inside the United States of America. Supporters want this approach to become the foundation of the alliance. And then critics warn that legal and industrial integration could reduce the freedom of either government when their political interests are not the same. That concern is already visible. Vice President JD Vance says that his recent conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was pleasant, honest, and direct. He rejects reports that Netanyahu confronted him. Vance still says that Netanyahu has gotten some things wrong, while describing that the Israeli Prime Minister is a good partner of the United States of America. Washington and Jerusalem share the goal of preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. They do not always agree on timing, acceptable risk, ceasefires, or the moment when diplomacy becomes more dangerous than military action. A stronger industrial alliance will not remove those differences. It will make them more important because both militaries will depend on the same production lines, intelligence channels, and operational planning. The battlefield in southern Lebanon shows why this technical cooperation matters. A reserve force from the 55th Paratroopers Brigade entered the building in Majd al-Zun during a planned clearing operation. A powerful explosive charge detonated inside the structure. Major Harel Brinstock and Master Sergeant Tamir Vaknin were killed. 4 other soldiers were seriously wounded and evacuated by helicopter to the Rambam Hospital in Haifa. The town sits on a coastal ridge between Tyre and the Israeli border, and Hezbollah developed tunnels, weapons, and infrastructure that is connected to an Iranian-backed unmanned aircraft and a base beneath the area. Israel later warned that the residents of Mazuri need to move at least 1 kilometer north before strikes on the Hezbollah targets will begin. So this is the type of battlefield problem that joint technology is supposed to solve. Troops need small drones that can enter a structure before the soldiers. They need sensors that are capable of detecting wires, pressure the plates, and then also conceal the explosives. They need underground mapping, robotic systems, and rapid links between intelligence units, aircraft, and forces moving through a village. The same logic applies to regional missile defenses. Jordanian air defenses recently intercepted 5 missiles launched from Iran towards the Maufak Salti Air Base, where American forces are also present. Regional reports say that Jordan warned Baghdad that another attack by Iran-backed militias from Iraqi territory could bring Jordanian strikes against the launch sites. Jordan has not publicly confirmed the full warning, so that part remains uncertain. The pressure on Oman is very clear. Militias operating from Iraq can launch missiles and drones while forcing Jordan to spend expensive interceptors. The launch crews remain protected by distance, Iraqi politics, and the ability to deny direct responsibility. A regional defense network could connect radars, aircraft, satellites, and command centers all across Israel, all across Jordan and the Gulf countries, and also American bases. It could provide earlier warning and allow the most suitable battery to engage each target. It will also require countries without public diplomatic relations with Israel to share highly sensitive information in real time. So, before we continue, I want to call on you to help us share the truth. From here, from Israel, behind the headlines. Like this report, subscribe to TBN Israel, and tell a friend what's going on here in this region. Because what you see on YouTube is only part of the story. You can get a closer, first-hand report and behind-the-scene moments, including stories of faith, resilience, and hope from Israel by going to tbn.org/journeys/boots. That's tbn.org/journeys/boots. And you can also text the word boots to 316-316 to receive direct updates from TBN Israel. And when Mati and Yair, when we report from Israel, you're not just watching the news, you are seeing what's happening through our eyes, through the people who live here on the ground. So, the other side of this military partnership is the question of who can make a binding decision inside Tehran. President Pezeshkian says that communications with the Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei is currently very difficult. He revealed that a major proposal received support from 12 of the 13 members of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. And according to Pezeshkian, Khamenei had agreed to accept the recommendation if at least 3/4 of the council supported it. The proposal passed that threshold very easy. Pezeshkian also claims that Iran's enemies plan to take control of the country within 48 hours, as they had done in Syria. There's no independent evidence of an American or Israeli operational plan carrying that timetable. It remains part of the Iranian government's political description of this war. So the decision-making process is more important than the claim. Iran and Oman may soon complete a geographic arrangement for commercial shipping to the Strait of Hormuz. The chance of an announcement has been described as 50-50 by Friday, but the Iranian negotiating delegation does not fully represent the Revolutionary Guards. The Guards control the fast boats, the coastal missiles, the naval mines, the drones, and many of the forces that are capable of closing the waterway. The foreign ministry and its signature will mean little if the military organization enforcing the strait refuses to implement it. Washington has already offered one narrow economic signal. The Treasury removed Fly Baghdad and 2 Boeing 737 aircraft from the American sanctions list. Some reports describe 3 companies. In practice, Fly Baghdad Airlines companies, and Iraqi Express are the names of the registrations connected to the same Iraqi carrier. The 2 aircrafts carry the tail numbers of YI-BAF and YI-BAN. The company had been accused of helping the Quds Force move fighters, money, Iranian missiles, rifles, and rocket launchers to organizations in Iraq, Syria, and also Lebanon. Public reports conflict over whether the company's chief executive was also removed from the sanctions list. That specific detail remains still unsettled. An American official says that the decision does not represent a broader policy change towards Iran or the Revolutionary Guards. Even so, Tehran can present the timing as evidence that the military pressure and the control of the shipping lanes can produce economic relief. The nuclear issue remains far larger than the airliner decision or the temporary maritime arrangement. Iran is assessed to possess about 440.9 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. That does not mean that Iran possesses 10 nuclear weapons. The material would require further enrichment to weapons-grade purity, followed by conversion, weapon design, assembly, and a functioning delivery system. If enriched further, the quantity is theoretically sufficient for the nuclear material that is needed for approximately 10 weapons. Airstrikes can damage the centrifuges, the tunnels, the electrical systems, the laboratories, and the conversion facilities. They cannot erase the knowledge that is accumulated by the Iranian scientists and the engineers. So Israel, therefore, feels that a temporary Hormuz arrangement will move international attention away from the nuclear file. And Iran could offer safer shipping and indirect negotiations while preserving its enriched uranium as a strategic leverage. The same conflict is visible in the Gaza Strip. Pezeshkian promised continued Iranian support for Khalil al-Hayya, the new political leader of the Hamas terrorist organization. He said that Iran would support decisions made by the Palestinian leadership. That position directly conflicts with the American plan to remove Hamas from the power of the Gaza Strip and disarm the terrorist organization. Israeli forces carried out 22 strikes and targeted operations between Thursday and Monday. And American officials then demanded explanations and called for the targeted assassinations and to stop them as negotiations move towards a second phase. Iran is telling Hamas that it still has political backing. Washington is telling Israel that military action must now serve a diplomatic timetable. That dispute reveals the central challenge inside the proposed alliance. The United States wants Israeli technology, intelligence, and operational experience, while expecting Israel to accept American decisions about escalation. Israel wants the American industrial strength and diplomatic backing without surrendering its ability to act against what it considers an immediate threat. The new alliance that is being designed in Washington will be tested by whether it produces interceptors faster, shares intelligence sooner, and prevents Iran from shifting pressure between different fronts. If America and Israel becomes industrial partners instead of donor and recipients, will the next Iranian escalation become easier to stop or bind both countries more tightly to the same wall? What do you think about that? Let me know what you think will happen. In the meantime, keep spreading the truth, follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to hit the subscribe button. Also, I call on all of you to pray for the situation. This is a spiritual war, and we need your help in prayer and support. So keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem, for wisdom for our leaders. And remember, we are here to share the truth, and we need your help, because the first casualty of a war is the truth. So let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.